Menendez is recognized for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I share Senator Toomey's concerns about children in school, but I also recognize there's a big difference between a private school that cherry picks its students and has a small, limited universe with a lot of spacing and a very small student ratio size to its teacher than a public school, such as in my state of New Jersey, that often is significantly overcrowded, has maybe 30 kids to a teacher, and where physical spacing and other issues are a challenge. So I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all suggestion that the public schools, can easily do what some of the private schools are doing without very significant issues of ventilation and other things. But I want to turn to one of the biggest lessons learned from the Great Recession, which was the need for the federal government to do more to proactively help workers and families navigate an economic crisis. Uh, Recessions last longer, they're far deeper, they hurt many people when Congress fails to craft solutions that rise to the magnitude of the challenge. I think we learned that lesson from the Great Recession. I certainly was here and saw the legislative responses to it, and it fell in my mind far short, and so therefore it was longer and deeper in terms of its hurt. The American Rescue Plan has some bold action in it, including the question of state and local government assistance. Ms. Parrott, approximately 1 million jobs at the state and local level have been eliminated or furloughed since the pandemic began. How does this compare to the 2008 and 9 recession? And what does that experience tell us would be the impact, not just to these families, but to the economy as a whole if states and local governments weren't able to rehire these needed workers?
Yeah, thank you for that. It's much worse, actually. In the worst part of the Great Recession, state and localities had cut 750,000 jobs. So this is a significantly larger number of layoffs. Those Great Recession era job cuts really did slow our economic recovery. States and localities were still laying people off when the rest of the economy was starting to move forward, and that acted as a drag on the rest of the economy. The rescue plans, resources for states, localities, territories, and tribes will help bring back teachers, other school workers, firefighters, others that have been laid off, will allow them resources to meet their COVID-19 costs. In places with revenue loss, it will fill that in, and it will allow those governments to be able to help struggling families and businesses all towards getting us on track to a strong recovery. The other thing I'll just say is that there are localities and states with economies heavily dependent on tourism and travel that are particularly hard hurt. Many tribal governments fall into that category, have significant needs. So these resources are really going to help fill in important gaps and pave the way to a stronger recovery.
Thank you. Ms. Matsui, our country navigates COVID crisis, tragic epidemic of gun violence, but we're also in the middle of a full-blown student debt crisis with 43 million owing over $1.5 trillion, which I think is not only a drag on the personal fortunes of those individuals and their futures, but on the collective economy. Have broad swaths of the 43 million who hold student loan debt been able to successfully obtain forgiveness through IDR?
Thank you for your question, Senator. Student loan debt is a critical issue for women, especially women of color, because they hold a disproportionate share of student loan debt and because gender and racial wage gaps means that it takes longer for women to repay those debts. My understanding is that a very limited number of borrowers have been able to have their loans canceled through income-driven repayment.
Well, according to data obtained by consumer groups, there's about 2 million student loan borrowers who have been in repayment for more than 20 years. Just 32 of 2 million have ever qualified for loan cancellation. So IDR is not working. The public service loan forgiveness isn't working. I think the American Rescue Plan facilitated the administration's path towards broad-based student loan forgiveness by including the provision that I authored that no longer taxes an individual on any forgiveness, along with Senator Warren. So I hope that we understand that in the midst of a pandemic and still employment and economic challenges, that we could unlock an enormous potential in this regard for women and for all students in our society who have overburdened by debt. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.